Hi, friends of Aculco, Artefacto, and also friends of PINTA 2014. I'm in the presence of Steward, who is the curator of PINTA Photo, which is the first time in the 5th edition that PINTA has dedicated a stand particularly to photography and photographers from Latin America. Sue, thank you for accepting, to say yes to this interview.
This is a great pleasure.
Tell us any particular theme that that you had in mind when you were selecting the work.
There was no particular theme. I just wanted to bring together references and examples of photographs from different parts of the Latin American diaspora, including the continent of Latin America and over into Spain and over into New York, and that kind of mixture. And I also was very keen to see if there are places where the cultures that they come from all mix up together, whether there is an identity in Latin American photography.
And is there an identity in Latin American photography?
I think you can't even use that word anymore, those words, because I just think it's, Latinos are in New York, then Latin Americans are in the continent, and then the Spanish have got part of it.
It's too diffuse, perhaps.
Pardon?
It's too diffuse.
It's too diffuse. It's very diffuse in a great way, though.
Yeah, good. Could you show us a little bit of the work that you have presented for PINTA?
Okay, this is the first one I'll talk to you about, and this is by a photographer from Buenos Aires, and these have been loaned to us by the embassy in Argentina. And this is Facundo de Zuveria, and his photographs are all black and white and very much in a style of 1930s, a little bit like Walker Evans, incredibly brilliant sense of geometry, and one of them is almost constructivist with reflections and angularity and geometry. They're beautiful prints, and in September they're going to do a show with 90 of these photographs in the embassy. So this is the beginning of it, and then we can shift on immediately to something completely different, which is a 21st century young person from Buenos Aires as well. That's Eugenia Ivanisevic.
Yes.
So with Eugenia we have this big photograph which was created as part of a still life competition, and she won the prize for it through the Arts Foundation. Now this is something that was created three-dimensionally on a table with objects laying on a table in different dimensions and different positions, and then she photographs it, and it looks like it's got no dimensionality at all, and it looks like it could be a digital collage that had been created, which is exactly the opposite. And that's the kind of work that she's done here, which is really fascinating. And she's a great example of having some kind of reference to where she comes from, because she's lived in London for 10 years. That was another aspect of what I was choosing, people who've lived here but they actually come from countries around the Latin continent. So in the middle there's a tiny little strand of photography, a colour picture, which is from San Telmo in Buenos Aires. And the funniest thing is that several of the Buenos Aires people who come and look at it go, "Oh my God, it's San Telmo," in the middle of this great thing, and surrounded by sea from Scotland and all the different places, the rocks that she's seen in this country. So it's a really great symbol of what's going on in this kind of mixture of her life and her work.
So they recognize this little stretch of San
Tiny
Telmo.
stretch of it, yeah. Straight away they saw that.
But it's great use of the, as you say, of the sort of the bidimensionality of the photograph, isn't it?
Yes.
You cannot tell about it.
No, you can't. And I took a long time to work that out, because she wouldn't tell me what it's about. Because I was judging the competition, and then suddenly she said, "Oh, well, I did it on the table and laid all these things out, and there's a beach ball at the top of this, which is the bright coloured beach ball sitting there with all this going on." Now let's go and look at the other one she did, which is completely different. This is Eugenia Ivanisevic, who did the photograph. So we're going to look at the second one of now, because I just talked about the other one. Sure. Yeah. Tell us what it's called.
Eugenia, can you tell us about what it's called and a bit of the story behind this photograph?
And the title.
And the title. Yeah. I think that's the most exciting one.
Yes.
So the title, we'll go with the title first.
Yeah.
It's called El Diplomático y Brian Ferry. There's a very simple anecdote behind it, which is that this is all printed in the darkroom, and I had a darkroom mate, if you want. We would always print together.
This was at the Royal College of Art.
This is at the Royal College of Art, yes. And so coming up to the degree show where you were kind of getting through your whole portfolio, we'd be printing together, and a common question would be, who do you think would own this piece of work, or in whose house can you imagine this piece of work? And my friend said, "Oh, Brian Ferry for sure." And I was like, "Really? Okay."
Okay.
And so we had like this whole conversation about how Brian Ferry would get home after work and like
Excellent.
enter his house, and this image would be in his house. and that's the time.
But it is an amazing photograph of this because we're looking at the coffee cup,
Yes.
which is but it doesn't look like a coffee cup.
No, it looks like a plug hole in the sink.
Yes, it does indeed.
Or a
Any particular
camera
reason?
as well.
How much did you experiment? It was something that was how can I say accidental almost happens, or something that you started
I
to work
work
with.
like quite intuitively because I work with materials that are often I'm very familiar with. So for example, the table was a table we had in the studio. So I saw it for 2 years. You know, you kind of build a relationship with these objects. The coffee cup as well.
A visual memory of it too. in
Yes,
certain ways.
yes. I think that's really important for me and my work. You build a relationship with the materials you end up working with. Because you build up a visual register of it, and also you start to associate moments to it.
And I presume the idea is to present them in an unusual way.
I don't know how conscious that was.
okay.
Yes.
Did you
I
spend
don't
a
know.
long time finding each of the objects? Because you have photographs here that you've put in the situation of it, and a lot of different elements to it. But did you take a long time to find what? Or had you got it worked out in your mind?
No, I never go to the studio with an idea of what I'm going to do. So I go in with materials. I go with like a little toolbox of objects and photographs and things. I set them all out, I look at them, and I start to play, like, put them together, associate them. And at a certain point, after a few days, I decide that's it. I make sort of different edits. So perhaps before... the images move around until I decide that's the final sort of composition, and then I go into the
What we haven't said is
shooting.
what the objects are, actually, because if you look at this, describe what you're seeing, because these objects don't look initially like what they are at all, do they?
Yes.
From the inside, from the
I
pinhole.
see that through everybody else. Everybody else shows me the other things they
Or
see.
say,
Because
for example,
me,
I'm going to tell you my first reaction. I thought it was like a Pangea when the continents of the world were together. And I
Yes.
thought, oh, this is Latin America here. Joined with Asia or Australia or
And
something.
this is the Nile River.
Yes, and then, but what happened here in the center? So this idea, everybody has a different interpretation.
But that's
different
interesting
read.
because the thesis I wrote at the Royal College was very much based on this series of work, and Pangea is one of the chapters in it.
yeah,
So
you are.
it's not far.
Intuitive.
It's
there you
all
are.
there.
It's all there.
Yes, yes,
Indeed. Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much, Virginia.
No, you're
Thank you.
welcome.
Cheers.
So let's go somewhere else, completely
Yes.
different. This is a
This is
a
brilliant. I
much,
love this
much
photo.
smaller photo, and it's a row of girls in Hong Kong doing some selfies, and they've all got their cameras out, and they were all carrying bags, designer bags, and the design on the bags is so brilliant. And it's just a lovely, lovely, warm, girly photograph.
I think it's brilliant. But it says so much about it. Hong Kong, the culture, of the selfies, the images. They're uniform in the way, short
exactly.
skirts,
Yeah.
shoes, and as you say, the bags.
And also the same legs, their knees are bent, and there's something about it. It's just, in a few years' time, they'll look back and be so thrilled to see something that's so close to their childhood days. It is beautiful.
Yes, brilliant.
And this is Luisa Dor, and she's from Sao Paulo. And I was desperate to have somebody from Brazil in this because we're in Brazil time. So she does a Hong Kong photograph. But it's gorgeous.
Excellent.
Now, this is a very, very different world. This is the 1970s and 1980s Spanish Harlem in New York. And this is Tonchi Vasquez, who is a Puerto Rican New Yorker. And these are portraits of various things to do with his life and the white Panthers that are going on at the time of the civil rights and so on. And a whole mixture of different things from different periods in the 70s and 80s.
Incredible. Only one photograph in color. Well,
Only
although
one
in color.
Yes.
Is this a small boy?
This is his little daughter, who's now
okay.
actually got a child of her own. So this is a very long time ago. There's one self-portrait of him here, which is he's photographing himself inside a frame, and then he's written all over it with blue pencil afterwards. So that makes that one. There's another one of him lying in water, and the back of his head with sort of black curly hair showing, and then the rest of it is very mysterious, and it's called
Brilliant photo.
mimesis.
It's
It
an
is a
excellent
beautiful,
photo.
yeah,
It's a
very
beautiful
beautiful.
photo. Yes.
And we've got they're all black and white apart from this little girl in colour. And these two portraits here of three little boys in the street carrying a banner about cleaning the streets. It was when there was a lot of stuff going on in New York and the mayor was out of action and there was rubbish everywhere. So these
El barrio clean.
Clean, yes. And then the next one is La Marqueta. And Marqueta was the market in the middle of Spanish Harlem. I remember going there. It was this enormous place where everybody went every morning to get the shopping. And these three guys looked like they could either be mafiosi or there's some kind of, it looks like a, something by one of the film actors from the 60s or 70s.
Scorsese's
film.
Yeah,
Sorry, that's what I meant.
Things,
yeah.
Yes.
And it's just a beautiful thing.
And it probably is all a historical sort of kind of work nowadays. Harlem has changed so much.
Yeah, exactly. That's
exist
right. The Marqueta doesn't exist, I don't think.
No, exactly.
And this is back onto this is the central wall that I chose. This is Michael Nyman, the composer, who a lot of people don't know he takes photographs. So I decided I would have photographs of his from the collection in Mexico City where he lives. He's been there now for 10 or 12 years. And his photographs, he's really very quiet about the photography he does, and it's extremely great. The centerpiece of this is the Mexico City Cine Opera House, which has started to collapse, and there was a big problem with it. And all these buildings are just crumbling and just detaching themselves. So he's gone round this, and he's been very involved in playing music to get money to keep it going as well. And in this, you get this mixture of his music being very repetitive and serial music. You get those images in the rows and rows of chairs that have collapsed, and you get the repetitiveness of the back of the chairs and so on. And then one of the beautiful pictures I love is actually in the projection room, which is all fallen and caved in a bit, but in a window you've got a strip of film hanging in this tiny window against the blackness and a tiny wedge of Mexico City seen through the window. And it's very, very abstract. It's unlike anything else there.
And green color.
There's some green color that looks like some sort of graph or some kind of oscillator that's going to tell your heartbeat, only in green, which is the weirdest thing, but very beautiful.
Incredible.
And there's a mirror on the side of the staircase which reflects all the chaos of the roof and the stairs and everything that's gone open to the skies.
There's something very appealing about photography and decay, isn't it? You
There
think
is,
about Detroit,
absolutely.
you think about that. And for example,
Yeah.
this photograph with the Coca-Cola, you know, and you know the ceiling just collapsing,
And
this grandiose candelabra or whatever.
Which is absolutely enormous, but in this photograph the bottles are in the foreground on this,
yes.
and this is the foyer where the bar was.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot of things. This is the inside of the roof, which is like a cat's cradle.
I'm very telling because Michael Nyman is a famous composer. He's famous for composing music more than for taking photographs.
Exactly.
Excellent.
That's why I put the headline, Michael Nyman's : photographer.
Excellent.
And then the other things we've got is a whole series from the street photography, which is all completely different, very bright, and I've got them floating against the wall instead of being framed and very particular. And there's a whole mixture of those with graffiti and then wires out, and because he's very into geometry and angles and stuff, so there's a lot of that grill effect in it.
Excellent.
Yeah, they're beautiful things actually.
Just look at this.
In contrast, we
indeed.
go to Lima, and this is Maria Jose Garcia Piaggio from Lima, and I met her 2 weeks ago in Madrid when I was judging some young photographers, and I liked this series of hairdressers. These are quite poor women who go to the open air market and have their hair styled, and so she's photographed these, and there's 4 of them, and they're just all looking really calmly into the camera, and it's just a really beautiful series of portraits which sets out against the rest of the thing.
Yeah, and she is photographed during the process. We are not seeing the final product.
We're not seeing the final one. All we're seeing is little tiny curlers.
Yes.
And one of them looks like, I really don't want to be here. Another one, this is the one with the pink thing. She looks like, oh, Mum, please don't make me wear these curlers. Another one is, yeah, I'm waiting to get this finished so I can go home and go do the cooking. But they're so beautiful.
Yeah.
So I decided to bring them over, and I've just pinned them on the wall, and they look gorgeous. They really do.
Excellent.
I think she's going to go farthest. She's a young photographer, and I'm right behind her.
Excellent, good. And here we go sort of landscape and composition.
Yes, collage. This is all hand
yeah.
collage. And this is Daphne Talmor from Caracas, Venezuela. And her work is, interestingly, a little bit like Eugenia Ivanisevic, only not on the same scale. She's operating collages which have layers of images from the photographs she's taken in the countries she's lived in, because she's moved around a lot. So you get a little section of Venezuela, a bit of Israel, where she's lived some of the years, also Scotland, great big swathes of colour that you can see the cut-out edges really beautifully. and there's kind of forests, and there's dead lands, and there's rivers and ghostly trees.
So that she takes the photos and then she cuts them.
And you know, when people cut for collages, usually you get a kind of effect of the white edge of it. She hasn't got that on any of this. She's got a strange lit edge, which is very beautiful.
It's like a leaf almost.
It is like a leaf. It's like leaf shape, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the one with the trees across it, all this in the background, it becomes almost cinematic.
Yeah, cinematographic indeed.
Very, very beautiful work.
Indeed.
And this is her mum.
And this is her mum?
This is her mother, Lihi Talmor. And she lives in Caracas too. And she's a photogravura. She does printing, and she's photographed looking down onto the ground into the manhole covers that have been left open in the streets in Caracas. And the things people have thrown in, like a potted plant, some leaves from all the autumn weather, and just different things in this. And she's written a book. She's done a book with this, so she's showing the pages of the book with her kind of poetic writing on the left-hand side. It's very different from her daughter.
And a kind of sepia color too,
yes,
which you know, that gives it this sort of kind of almost romantic feeling.
I think it's very romantic, actually. The idea of this plant pot inside filling this pothole is pretty extraordinary.
Excellent. And here we come to what I think is my favorite of this, Gustavo Espinosa, from Cali, Colombia. And well, we were talking before the interview, so what I like about him is like he's turning this into almost like a painting. His photography presented as a modern painting.
Well, one of the reasons I like that, I mean, I like his work very much. He lives in Derby, and he's lived here quite a while. And he's a very kind of shy man. He doesn't really come out and exhibit, but he's exhibited a lot in Germany and other places, but not in this country. He won a prize in Dresden. But his work, there's no doubt about it. It looks like painting, and a lot of people are questioning that, but it's absolutely not. It's all photographic, some of it digitally produced. Some of it looks like Rothko with a kind of psychedelic edge to it, the colouring in it and the pattern.
Indeed,
And then there's this strange black hole, which is actually, you straight away saw it. It's a footprint. I took ages to work that out.
Well, I thought it was, I thought that the ecology sort of theme with the carbon footprint, etc., etc. I don't know, but that was my association as
He calls it the construction of meaning, and he's been working for quite a long time on water and fire and earth and so on. And this is earth and water particularly. And the one that looks like Rothko is inside a skip, looking down on that with water. But they're extraordinary, beautiful
And we're looking
things.
at textures too, isn't it?
Oh,
It's the representation of
yes.
textures. It's almost if photography could produce textures.
Yes.
Here's what it is.
And there's one twig there. That becomes a dimensional object, doesn't it? You could pull it off the wall.
Yeah,
I think
amplified.
he's very, very talented. I think they're wonderful.
Excellent.
And then the final one in this is the biggest photograph in the whole group. And this is by Rosario Lopez, who's from Bogota. But the actual photograph is in the south of Argentina. And this is the glacier, the Perito Moreno glacier. And this is coming towards you. I find it incredibly beautiful and incredibly ominous.
Yeah.
There's a great field of ice coming towards you, and you know it's dissolving in front of you. It's extraordinary.
And it's dirty too.
You know what
dark.
it is?
Yes.
I discovered today it's the remains of the ashes from the volcanoes, which give it these colours, these tones of darks and reds, and it's beautiful, isn't it?
Beautiful.
And I'll tell you one more thing about her, which we were going to have, but we didn't have time to do it. But you can look her up and see these. She had an installation in her studio in the gallery where she'd got loads and loads of bookshelves, and she took plastic bags, filled them with plaster of Paris, and shaped out icebergs. So all the shelves are covered in mini icebergs, the whole room. Beautiful. Absolutely
incredible.
Beautiful. Stunning work.
A final question. Is anything specific about Latin American photography that you see that put it apart from the rest, do you think, in terms of the narrative, in terms of the themes? Or again, we go back to that initial question, it's too diffuse to actually give it.
I think it's true. I think it is true. I mean, I can't position it because even each country hasn't got a great difference. If you're talking about Brazil, you're dealing with a whole different thing because you've got much less photography based there. It's more kind of painting and installations and conceptual. Conceptual here as well, actually. Chile's quite conceptual. The works I've got, they tend not to be in this particular place except for Gustavo Espinosa, yes. Yeah, it's quite difficult to pin it down, actually. I think it's something I'm going to work out and write about because it's an important aspect.
So, Steward, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
This is great.
Cheers.
Thank you.